Panel that kind of transitions us from yesterday into today. Yesterday we had really great community conversations about the operation model that communities need to work through and figure out how they want to structure themselves with a private sector partner. And also what that means for the funding options. Once you do structure yourself, what does that limit or make available certain types of funding? So hopefully this panel can ease our curiosity about how did you do it, because we do have 3 communities up here who have built networks with private sector partners, and they are a range of communities in size, characteristic, how they decided to structure their operation, and also how they decided to fund it. So we will dig into more of that. We do have 3 questions that we wanted to ask our partners here to divvy up and decide how they wanted to present. And so I think the easiest thing to do is to work through each community so that you get the full picture of an individual community, and then we'll move on to the next community. They'll speak for about 8 minutes each, and then we hope to open it up for Q&A with all of you. So first up, it looks like we have Alan, and he is from the Lincolnville Communications and is partnered with Nicole here from the town of Bowdoinham. So our questions as a reminder, what planning resources were useful? How and when did you decide to, who's going to own the network? So when did and how did you decide who would own the network and operate it? And then finally, when and how did you decide to address subscriptions or take rate? I think it's on now, but just try it one more time.
Test, test. Can you hear me? Good. Nicole? I seriously, I think you should start the conversation because how you got into it and how you as a community decided to do that, and in the sense of you had a number of tools that you used and moved this process forward before we were involved. So you brought us in. Go.
So for the town of Bowdoinham, we went through this, it's kind of a, I'd say, 10-year process of the town wanting internet connectivity for the whole town and not really knowing how to get it or who to talk to. So we had a cable internet committee that disbanded, and then 2 years later we had another committee take on the project because we felt that internet was really needed for our unserved area, especially for all of our home-based businesses and our aging residents and our school kids. You know, it was very important for us. So our committee went about it by trying to find who possible providers were for us and inviting them to come talk to us, showing them the areas that we knew we needed service, and trying to find out who would be willing to work with us. Through that process, we got LCI to come talk with us, and we liked what they had to say and their options, and they were willing to come back and talk with us. So that was a great start, and that's where we moved this process from. After, you know, talking with several folks, our committee looked at the pros and cons and decided, you know, which direction the town wanted to go. And then LCI was willing to move forward with us.
Yeah, I'll talk a little bit about that process, then we'll get to the choices on ownership and all that kind of stuff and take rate stuff, because that's where the rubber meets the road. Yeah, it was great. This is one of the examples where they're not exactly in our footprint. We're a network from Bangor all the way to Freeport. We own all of our own fiber, basically. So we have 2 telephone companies. They're not in that. We were called to come out and meet with the folks in Bowdoinham. And I always say that if you're in our footprint, but you've called me out to meet with you, that's not a good sign. Usually that means you got a problem because you're very rural, and there's not a lot of competitors that say, hey, let me come out and offer you many options out there. That's what that means when I'm invited to your meeting, usually. And so we went out there a number of times, and they kept calling us back to meet with them. And I always tell the story that I went out 3 different times to Bowdoinham. Every time was in the winter, and it was at night. I never got to see Bowdoinham. I had never been there in the daytime or summer. I hated it. It was cold, and it was rural, and we couldn't make the business model work. And every time I went, would have that same conversation. I just go, no, I can't, I don't think we can do this. And it wasn't until a number more of those times and that creative thinking of that group that the funding part came about. And then we started talking, when the funding came about, they have a TIF fund that they were able to use. We were able to look at that and say, how do we leverage that with us? And then how do we look at our network and do we want to be here? And the answer is yes, but we had to be able to leverage that. So that's how we kind of came to partner with them. And
Nicole, can
that's
you
good.
talk a little bit more about the tax incremental financing that you guys decided to leverage?
We have a TIF district that had funding available, and it isn't, getting internet for our community is a economic development priority for our town. We have a lot of small businesses that need internet for their business. So it was a big priority for us to do that, and we were lucky that we had that resource available for us.
How long had it been set up?
2014.
Great. How and when did you guys decide to start focusing on the subscriptions that you would need and the take rate that you were aiming for?
We got a planning grant, not this past round, but the round before, to do a planning study for LCI to look at those questions.
Yeah, and what we did with that, and we used that money to come in to look at, first of all, we hadn't committed to doing it. We had to do the planning first to make sure we did the cost. What was it going to cost? And that's what we did. And not only did we do that, just that rural area, which started at 195 unserved homes, but it's now up to, I think we're getting close to, yeah, but and I add more, we're adding more and all the time. It's going to get to around 230, I think, unserved homes that we'll cover through this grant. And then we started looking at that, doing that cost, but we also costed out, kind of looking at the total town. Because we're looking at it from a business, you're asking what providers, how did we get here? We're looking at it from a network business model. When we look at our network, we're over here, and we're doing some building in Alna, Bowdoinham's over here, Bath and Brunswick, you got the map, right, in your head? Bath and Brunswick's down here. That's our outer ring. We want to do that. We got a hole in the middle. So we always said Bowdoinham's too far away, but if the model works and the take rate works, then we can get in there. So the funding that they put up from the TIF with our match that we put in and then the Connect Maine piece, that's what allowed us to get there. What we did with the take rate stuff, we started looking at, we were learning too as we go along as providers about how to work with communities. It's easy to sign a survey. I want broadband in my community. I support the Connect Maine process. Great. It's harder to sign an application. It says, I will pay $49.95 a month for X or whatever. So we made that as a condition of our working with them for the business model to work. Yep, let's apply for the grant, let's do the match, but also we want 50% take rate of those 215, so we just said 100. We rounded it down to 100. And that's where the partnership really has to be good, because I told them I'd bring our sales force to bear on this. Well, that's me. We're a small company. So that's why the community had to be involved with that. And that's what really, I think, made it work for us, that partnership piece.
Great, thank you so much. Our next group here is Tracy and John. And John is representing the town of Alton. And Tracy is from OTELCO. Sorry.
Hi, everybody.
Catch my breath.
I'm going to just tell you where the story started. Alton, 90% of the town border of Alton is within OTELCO's ILEC footprint. And so we have alternate Connect America model responsibilities within Alton, and we started building to them a couple of years ago with a Connect Me grant that the grant itself served 30 homes, and there were another 39 that we needed to pass to do that. So the long story short is a few years ago, we built fiber to the prem to 69 homes in Alton. And then, I'm going to let John tell you the next piece.
Yes, quick show of hands though, who knows where Alton is? Oh wow, that's really good. Let's go through the Alton Bog right on 95 heading north. Right? So. But anyways, yeah, so back to the story, but I always like to do that just to find out, But, we saw that, the haves and haves not, right? So part of town, 30 homes got fiber to the premises, and then we started getting questions at the town office saying, hey, how come they're getting it, but we still have DSL, which is okay, but it's not great. And then other, further out, it gets even worse. So we started looking and contacted OTELCO and said, hey, what would it take to really expand this out to the entire town? What could we do to make that happen? And so we put a plan in place and said, okay, let's do the numbers. So OTELCO did the study, looking at it, and said, okay, we think the project will be this amount. And so then at that point, you know, my full-time job is I work at the university at a development center, a research engineering center. And what do you do when you don't have the funds to need what you do? So you go get a grant, right? So we looked at Connect Me Authority and said, yes, this seems to fit. They've done it before. What would it take for the town to put in to make that happen? So the town, kind of a three-way funding model, looked at the town will put in a big chunk of change, and we saw this as a very valuable piece, especially for economic development and trying to attract more businesses to the town. And then, but OTELCO really stepped up on their side and said, yeah, this is going to work for us, and we'll put in X amount, and then we got the grant as well. So, and I think it's the second largest grant the Connect Me Authority has done. And looking at all 800 residents, you know, in the town being covered, we wanted to make sure that that was really part of the contract. Was we need to make sure we cover every single resident in town that wants it, and then trying to get the support of town was not that hard. It was actually a lot easier than I thought it would be. But, you know, sent out postcards, just did a lot of barrage of emails, Facebook posts, postcards. I think we sent out 2 or 3 rounds of postcards just saying, you know, come to the meetings. Let's get the town involved. Let's get everybody together to see if we can really up our game and get this new connectivity. So I'll let Tracy talk a little bit more about kind of her side.
So first of all, this is one of those times when you're the local provider and there's no competition and they call you, and it's a good thing. Just saying. But anyway, so we, as John said, did a barrage of multimedia. We went to the newspapers, we sent postcards, we sent mailings. Ultimately, let's see, at town meeting to authorize the allocation of funds, 60 people came to the town meeting, which apparently is about triple the normal, and 59 of them voted in favor of it. We had, I believe, 75% of residents indicate support for the Connect Me grant when we finally submitted it. And of course, we got the grant. And I think that the key to take rate really are those 2 things, because it created a buzz in the community. And we then asked people, mostly for logistical reasons, to let us know in advance if they were definitely going to purchase service. In the case of Alton, a lot of the existing phone infrastructure is buried cable. And so if the homeowner wanted to keep the fiber underground, we needed to get in the ground before it froze. So part of the rationale was, if you want the service, let us know, particularly if you have underground utility and you don't want to wait till spring if you want to keep it underground. And at this point, we have, of the 260 locations that we're serving with this build, we have 85 of them waiting for the phone call, which should be happening in the next week, to start scheduling installs. And in several of them where the cable, where they do want to keep the underground utility, the conduit's being installed right now. So it's a lot of work, but it's just a lot of community outreach, and we really did a good job with the take rate. And the only other thing we didn't address is ownership, which...
That was a fairly easy one. 800 residents, 260 locations. We did not want to own a telecommunications company, so we let OTELCO handle that.
Great. We didn't plan to have the islands last, but I'll take it. So first up, we have Roger from Islesboro, and their internet service provider partner is GWI.
Yes, the Islesboro Municipal Broadband is a public-private partnership between the town of Islesboro and GWI. The journey got started, well, way back in 1996, but it took root in around 2013 with a letter from a couple on the island to the select board saying, we've got to move because we can't get on the internet on the island. And the select board formed a committee, and we started looking at various alternatives. Our first step was to do what we called a census to find out what people were actually using to get on the internet on the island and what their needs were. We found that there were some unserved areas of the island, and we found that basically money solved the problem. And most of the summer community homes had good internet access, but we had school children sitting in the library parking lot doing their homework. We developed an RFP, and we had 3 goals. Everybody in the town would be connected. We wanted FCC minimum broadband service, now and forever. And we wanted local people available to do the support. My GWI compatriot just showed up. We had 5 responses, 4 from incumbent telecommunications companies, 1 from GWI. And this has never been an anti-incumbent telephone company crusade on our part. We realized very early on that no commercial company with shareholders was going to invest in Islesboro as a place. And, but GWI responded with a proposal that said if the town would take the capital construction risk, then GWI could run the system. And the result is the Islesboro Municipal Broadband Network, which is a town-owned infrastructure. The town owns and maintains the infrastructure. The subscribers, there are 625 subscribers, which is around a 90% take rate. The subscribers pay $360 a year to the town, and they get symmetric 1 gigabit broadband delivered through a fiber. The $360 a year, the architecture of this system, financial architecture, is that the subscriber cost, the $360, pays GWI's fees for connectivity. As I said, the town underwrites the payment of the construction loan and the maintenance of the network. And I will let Kerem talk about why he thinks this has been a good partnership. And it has been very successful.
Well, I think it's been very joyful. I think part of the reasons why I think it has been immensely instructive and joyful is for 2 reasons. One is the town got organized. I mean, I think Roger plays down his humble role, but the town really got organized with an intent to do a large project, a universal access project. Everybody in the town was approached and said, this is what we are going to do. And that takes a lot of planning, a lot of conversation, a lot of meetings. And in that intentful design towards getting to an end goal, then the machinery sort of falls into place. Because now you have the citizens have a vested interest in the success of the project. Everybody has a vested sense of this has to happen because we already have answered the questions of benefits, of what it means to be able to get from point A to point B because of having this kind of infrastructure. And for a company like GWI, where we like to run hard and we like to run fast, then those psychological hurdles are now evaporated, right? Now it becomes a question of mechanistically moving through the task list, and the task list is long. You know, it's long. So that ties into the second reason why the project was successful, because we really, after a lot of thought and deliberation, decided to share transparently the information at hand, together with the construction crew, together with how we are wanting to do things, together with coordinating with Roger and the town about, hey, this is what we need to get out to the citizens. This is the kind of notices that need to go out on a repetitious basis. These are the kind of meetings we need to have to be able to divulge what kind of activities are coming down the way. I mean, we're talking a master plan that was transparent to all the stakeholders, with all the warts, with all the challenges already in there, so that when things did get tough or there was a hiccup, everybody knew why and everybody knew what we were going to do about it. And I think people like Mark and everybody else on the panel know that when the transparency of information is evident and also easy to access, then everybody knows there is only one agenda, which is to get connectivity. There is no other agenda. So what we appreciated with Roger was we could call Roger and say, Roger, this is what we're seeing, and do you have a problem with us calling X, Y, or Z to understand what is going on? So there was a 360-degree communication loop, which eats up an enormous amount of time. Enormous amount of time. But if we didn't do that, I think we'd still be talking about trying to get connectivity to Islesboro. And I think to some large measure, there's an instruction over there is, if there is intent, if there is focus, it will happen. If there is doubt, if there is second thought, it will not happen. And for a company like GWI, we found ourselves in this stream of good intentions across the board. So even if there were things that were not our responsibility, we thought we should bring it to Roger's attention or the group's attention and say, you know what, we can do this, and is it okay? Sort of backfill. And vice versa. There were places where people said, well, you can't get there. Is it okay if I did that? Sure. So those were the two really big reasons that I think that project happened.
Thank you. And finally, we have Axiom, Mark from Axiom, paired with Cliff Island, Cheryl Crowley.
So I just want to tell you a little bit about Cliff Island. It's a very small island with about 50 year-round residents. We are the last stop on Casco Bay lines in Casco Bay outside of Portland. We are the last stop in a lot of ways. Even our DSL was less effective than most. So we really did have an issue out there, and we didn't realize it. So I'm part of a group called Sustainable Cliff Island. Cliff Island is part of the city of Portland. We're a neighborhood, but because we're kind of that last stop place, we kind of create our own infrastructure on the island. And one of the things we're trying really hard to do is survive as a year-round community. With only 50 people, most of them being over the age of 60, that's really hard to do. And we're identifying things like affordable housing and jobs and our fuel depot, and we have a lot of things on our plate. And then Island Institute very nicely put one more on our plate. Hey, do you think broadband is a sustainability issue? Yeah, it is, for a whole host of reasons. Again, the job opportunities when you're on a little island with a long commute, telecommuting is now a really big, advantage to an island as far as job opportunities. Not everybody can be a lobsterman. But also our school access, our educational access. Kids do go to the city for school, and they have homework that really needs the dependable internet access. We're looking into telehealth, telemedicine, because we have our older population, but we also want to encourage younger population. And a 3-hour round trip to Portland can be pretty difficult for our elderly, especially somebody who's limited or sick. So in our process of doing all this work, we're kind of stumble along, and I have to say, Island Institute in our pamphlet has a really nice little outline of what we did for how we came about, Sustainable came about to broadband, and what we've done for our work. So we really leaned on Island Institute, and about 5 years ago is when they put the bee in our bonnet. About 4 years ago, they started these conferences and really educated us on what broadband was and the terminology and so on and so forth, and it's really grown since then. So I have to say that Island Institute, between that and the Tilson report and some of the other legwork, really helped us. You know, we're a small community and we didn't have a lot of resources, so we leaned on them an awful lot. Then as we went through our process and we put out RFPs and we got more information, Axiom, Mark, really seemed to meet our needs the best. And so they really helped us with kind of figuring out, okay, what are our next steps? I'm going to let Mark speak to a lot of that in just a moment. In the process, having so many projects and getting to the point of coming up with a business plan, Sustainable Cliff Island realized very quickly that we did not want to manage this as a business. And exploring a few options, we came up with a solution that our friend Walt helped us with, and that was to form an LLC. And so we did form an LLC called CI Fiber. CI Fiber, working with the numbers that Axiom gave us, went out and did private fundraising, and also secured subscriptions. And I'm going to let Mark speak to that too. So that's kind of the long and short of our resources and the ownership.
Thank you. Cliff Island is a long way out there. It's a 2-hour boat ride with several stops to get out there. So, and it is part of Portland, which is a very interesting model because they if you don't think you can do it, Cliff Island did it. And for Cliff Island to do it, it was really like Islesboro, like the work with GWI and what happened there and what Alan and Tracy are doing. It is achievable. It really is, because it took a group of people to say, we're going to do this. And once that happened, things started to fall into place. And just for all of you, I think all of us as providers are waiting for the next town to walk up to us and say, we want to do this. That's what happened with Cliff Island. I was at this conference, I was speaking, I stepped off the podium, and a guy who's not here today but was a part of Cliff Island came up to me and started talking to me. And that was the beginning of a conversation where trust was built and where the process began and now is completed. And there are, I mean, Cliff Island, I think they're pretty happy about this. They have better connectivity than Portland. They have better connectivity than New York City, frankly. I mean, really, that's what's happening on Cliff Island. So it's pretty impressive and pretty exciting. The way, one of the big negatives, the big questions that come up early on in the conversations is around take rate. Who's going to take service? And there are always people in the community who are very skeptical that you're never going to be able to meet the take rate that you as the provider suggest is going to happen, because there's just a lot of skepticism about, is really, for a lot of people, is internet that that important? And we believe and we know from our work that it ends up being fine. But at the beginning, when you're trying to talk to a community and you haven't built anything, you've just gone out there to meet with them, it's hard for them to envision that on Cliff Island, we needed to have 60 subscribers to make it work. And I felt like Donald Trump. It's going to be great. It's going to be great. We're going to get there. And, there were people in the community who had a hard time. There's no way we're going to get to 60 subscribers. And it's a real way to scare people and to just keep people a little uncomfortable about the process. So the way to fix that is early on in the process is to go out and get subscribers. Basically for us, we use a model where we say, you're going to pay us $99 up front. We're going to give you that money back in your first 2 months of subscription. So you're not paying a deposit that you're never going to get back, but it's an act of good faith on you as a citizen to tell us, once you give me $99, you're going to take service, right? It's not just, Alan was talking about this, it's not just signing on a piece of paper, love to have service. This is about an exchange of money. And once you have skin in the game, the likelihood of you coming and taking service at the end of the project, when the project gets built, is much greater. So I would encourage you to do a lot more work up front to try to get some sense of what you think subscribership might look like. It really helps us as providers, but it also, we can tell you, I can tell you, from my perspective in working in rural communities, 50% take rate is just the threshold. It typically ends up being, by year 2 or 3, 70%, 65%, somewhere in that range, maybe even 80%, depending on what what the makeup of the community is. So we're pretty excited about Cliff. We just got completed. They have 71 subscribers. We needed to have 60. We have another 6 or 7 that are gonna, we had a couple of, by the way, projects get delayed. Projects get delayed. Just FYI. We got, anyway, and so some of those subscribers who are seasonal residents are going to have signed up, given us their money, but they're going to start next year. So we have another 6 or 7. And on Cranberry Isles, which is not here today, we started with 130 subscribers up front before we built it. We are now up to 180. So we continue to add subscribers on Cranberry Isles. Anyway, it's a really important piece from my perspective.
Great, thank you. Questions from the audience? Do we want to pass around a mic or do cards, or I'm looking to some of the logistical folks here, or none of the above.
Why don't people write questions on cards if you have them, and maybe we'll do 1 or 2 on a mic while we get
Yeah,
people to write on cards.
that would be great. I actually have one for John and Tracy, and this can obviously filter throughout the panel as multiple communities have acquired planning grant funds from Connect Maine. In addition to the actual cash, what resources were really critical to helping you move through that process, that planning process?
I would have to, thank you, forgot about this. I think that just the support from the town, in-kind support. They were able to provide us with the tax database for mailing, you know, whatever is public record legally, so that we could use that for mailing and encourage people to contact us through a web form, which then would give us other contact information from them. Every time we need to get word out, of course, what we did is we created a page on our website that's not in the navigation. So if you go to otelco.com/Alton, it's there, and we update that periodically with information. But the townspeople, those that actually have access to the internet, are really good about following the town's website, not website so much as Facebook page. And so every time that we've had something that we wanted to share with the community, I write to the town admin, and it's on their Facebook page as quick as Kendra gets it on ours. And it's just cooperation and access.
Excellent. Anyone else want to talk about the additional resources before, in addition to the funding?
I would, just real quick. Kind of building on what Tracy was saying was, and Mark, you're the one always, you got to have a champion, right? And there are champions, and obviously they're in your community. You're the champions. You're here doing this, but you got to have inside scoop on the town office. I mean, that's what's great. I mean, the Broadband committee did all that legwork, but it was because they had a community planner and economic developer person that was really organizing that. And the town manager and Nicole and I worked together as a team. And they're tough negotiators too. That was the other thing. They kept us on track. They knew what they had. I got subscribers out here that are unmet. You're going to get good take rate. We got some money. Here's what we want out of you. So that was really effective, I think, and we encouraged that and I think that was helpful. So, but having that kind of that resource at the town office. They give the monthly newsletter and all that. So that kind of, they did a lot of the outreach for us and helped us with all of that. So
Great. Before we pass the mic, just a clarifying question for Bowdoinham and LCI. Who owns the network and who's operating the network?
We will own it when it's done, and we'll operate it.
Okay, yep. Great, thank you. And then moving down to Islesboro in particular, can you describe the funding financing side that the town had to do before subscriptions?
Yeah, there was a 3-phase funding model that we used. We raised money from private donations for seed money, for walking around money that we used for planning, hiring consultants. We used Tilson in Portland. The second phase was dependent on a town meeting vote to allocate $260,000 to do the design of the network and get it out for construction bids, and that was approved. And the third phase was the construction bond approval itself, again, a town meeting vote where we asked the town to approve the borrowing of $3.8 million. At that point, we also had modeled the system on 550 subscribers paying $360 a year. So we knew that if we had 550 subscribers, that it would be a viable business model for the town to do. And ultimately, we then followed the other towns' model and put out a survey and said, please sign up. Are you interested? And then a second phase of, okay, send us money and we'll put you on the construction list.
I know you get this question all the time, and I'm curious if we've gotten it down to one sentence. So at the end of the day, including all of the town financing, the bond, what is the cost per customer?
Cost per customer. Again, the model is that the town pays the construction bond off, which is $260,000 a year, and a minor subsidy for out of the town budget for maintenance and insurance, and then the subscribers pay the actual fees of use and connectivity. So the cost per customer would be, I don't know, around $900 a year. Yeah.
Thank you. Specific to, I guess, yeah, basically the same question for Alton. How did the financing work on the town side of things?
Yeah, the town of Alton's actually lucky enough to have we kind of have a large capital fund that is funded through, there's the Juniper Ridge landfill, which is actually in an old town, but the entrance road is in Alton. And we get tipping fees out of that. That goes into a large fund that we then use for capital projects, paving roads, and infrastructure improvements. And so the townspeople, it actually no tax impact to the townspeople. So it was a pretty simple decision for them to be able to say yes, $150,000 for this project was pretty much a slam dunk deal as far as, 60 people voted, 2 against. And so it was a pretty good deal for them. So.
And I think if you look, I think we have a $700,000 budget on the whole project, and so I don't know if I can do the math in my head, but $700,000 to build to 260 houses comes out to, somebody has a calculator on their phone, but that's the cost per household for construction.
Great. Kerem, this seems like a good question for you to kick off, and then the other providers are more than welcome to chime in. What percentage of the networks that you operate or are you working with communities on that are actually municipally owned? And is there a pro or con to municipal ownership? I hear Mark laughing.
It's 9:55. So the first question, in terms of the number of municipal networks we own and operate, we obviously are working with Islesboro. We're working with Sanford. We've done a lot of work in South Portland. And at the current time, we're thinking of expanding in a handful of counties, together working with the municipalities. So I think that's the easier question. In terms of pros and cons, I truly think it boils down to the psychology, the makeup of the community. And it's a multidimensional question that the community has to introvertly ask itself, which is, what are its capabilities and capacities from a financial point of view, from a technical point of view, from an operational point of view? Owning and operating a fiber network is not a trivial task. It requires a certain set of skills and expertise. Do you have them? If not, do you want to acquire them? Is it too much of a pain in the butt to do so, or not? Those are questions that the community should ask itself, at least on one dimension. The other dimension is, has there been a buy-in from the community to do a municipal project? And if so, what is that? What are the conversations that have happened in order for that ball to move forward? there's a multiplicity of stakeholders in a community. It's not a homogeneous event in a community. There are multiple demographics, multiple populations, multiple age groups, and also multiple needs. Does it have to do with economic development? Does it have to do with population retention? Does it have to do with getting more school-age families in? There's a multiplicity. Telehealth, remote working, distance learning. So what are those things that drive you? Remember, the value of the network is in its use. It's no use for us to build stuff and twiddle thumbs. That's not the value. The value is the number of people that are using it day in and day out. Not just for a year, not just for 3, but 5, 10, 20 years. So you have to almost force yourselves to think ahead in a time scale that maybe we're not used to thinking. If we're used to thinking a year or 2, this is a longer time scale. The other thing is, are you aware of the actual mechanics of building a network? As Mark said, and they know well, it takes time. It takes energy. There's a multiplicity of permitting, regs, paperwork to fill out. Are you available for that? One of the things we appreciated with Islesboro is, and I think, what's the most valuable commodity? Time. We met once a week, at the very least, on a very regimented way, right? Multiple people around the same table, all the time, every week. That's a lot of time. So multiply that by 5, 10 times if you're going to do that all by yourself. You can't. So what are those partnerships that you want to intentionally form? Who do you trust? What is that verification factor that you have not only in your community but in your partners? So are you being transparent? If you're creating an RFP process, how well thought is it? Is it truly transparent? Did you release it in a way so that you got all the information that you wanted? The questions and the answer sessions that you had with the providers, was it equivalent? Was it fair? What were the decision metrics that you had on your side that you articulated to everybody around the table? So those are a lot of questions, and you shouldn't be overwhelmed because you have resources and support around you. Whether it's Connect Maine, whether it's the Island Institute, whether it's the people that have gone through this journey, we've come a long, long way with these conversations, so reach out. And probably the most important thing is be humble. Because the biggest, at least from our perspective, is one of the biggest roadblocks is if you think you know everything, because nobody knows everything and everybody. So, collaboration is key.
Other providers want to touch on municipal ownership?
Well, we like it. We like it because we want to change Maine, and we want to make Maine great, really. And by changing the equation of provider and subscriber and having a strong voice at the town, you change the relationships and you get a stronger voice in how you want service delivered into your community. So we kind of like it. Our projects are all based on that until they tell us they don't want it that way and they would like us to own it. Then we're happy to own it if that's what they would like us to do. But we pretty much try to encourage the towns to own it themselves, and that we'll operate it in a way that gives it the care and justice it deserves within the community. And the community has to do a couple things. But in exchange for those couple of things, we'll do the vast majority of all of the technical aspects of the network. So I encourage you to think about that from our perspective, because we like that model. We like owning the customers and not owning the infrastructure.
Okay.
I think it's a better.
Tracy, yes, please.
Could I just add something? I think it's important if the town borrows money for the town to own an asset as a result of that. Yeah, you have to. And the second thing is, you're nuts to try to be your own ISP. Okay?
Right, of course.
Yesterday, in some of the conversations that were had in breakout groups, sadly, we're in a place where, in certain cases, a municipality needs to own the infrastructure. I'm not saying that they should become the ISP and the network operator, but if you don't have a local provider who can come in and work with you like we did, or work with them like you did, the cost to go in and overbuild another local network provider to give you the network that you want is cost prohibitive, very difficult to make a business model. And so it puts the town in a place where you have to borrow the money, unless you have, a discretionary fund with lots in it. And so the minute you do borrow the money, you do need to own your network. So there are times where that's just simply necessary. I guess the big question is, if you're going to own it, how are you going to operate it so that you don't have to become an ISP and a network operator and buy bucket trucks and things like that?
That's a great lead, and yeah, you can answer that one as well as starting to answer the question of which of your towns had to hire or create new positions in order to make sure that the operation of these new networks would happen in the way that you intended them to.
Yeah, that's good. I'm going to answer the first question,
Yes.
which is pros and cons, because nobody really did the con part on the municipal part.
Oh, go for it.
Sorry, I thought maybe there aren't any. I don't know. I thought of one. It won't work in all of your communities. You're probably going to have to go through the process of that, and that's what this is about, and that's good. But the con is that, I always say, don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. So it's a matter, and some of that is timing. And when we go into communities, we like to go in and try to be as transparent as we can and say, of course, we have two different versions. We have our ILEC communities where we are the incumbent provider, Lincolnville Telephone Company and Tidewater Telecom. But then we have a larger ILEC or CLEC footprint where we go in and we say, look, let's look at all the options. Start with what you want to accomplish. Do you want fiber to every home, every premise? And that's the case. Fine, let that be the objective, not I want it to be municipally owned, and I want fiber to, what's the outcome? And just fiber every home that's affordable. Then try not to, there aren't cookie cutters, there aren't municipal cookie cutters. These guys up here are all experts, but they don't know everything. You know it. Start with that and then go through that process. Sometimes you'll save time, energy to get through that, and then you go to other solutions, which are public-private ones, partial ones. There's lots of options. So I just ask you to please stay open to that. I know the movement here is largely about moving to municipal, it sounds like to me. No, it does, okay. But stay open to that, just from your own community standpoint, that's all. So that was
Nicole,
one.
do you have additional thoughts on that? I know you guys considered multiple operation models, multiple technology options.
Yeah, in looking at those options, you got to see what's best for your town. What does your town have the interest in doing? And for Bowdoinham, they weren't interested into owning infrastructure, and we really wanted to get our people connected now. That was really, they didn't want to wait another year. They wanted it now, and there wasn't the interest in being owners of the infrastructure. So.
Thank you. Did you have to hire anybody? Did you have to create new positions at the town?
Not for us, as we didn't end up owning it. There's only 5 of us in the town government, so it was very, very prohibitive with the staff we currently have. So
We didn't have to hire anyone. We've been operating for 2 years now. We have a small broadband oversight committee that watches over GWI's deliverables to the town, and we meet 4 times a year. It's very low maintenance.
We like to hire somebody on, well, these are islands, so we'd like to have somebody on the island be a technician for us, and we promise the community up front that we're going to hire at least one person to do that. It's actually an additional little bit of an attractor to our process. The person on Cliff Island hasn't sent us a bill yet, so we're pretty excited about that. And I don't think he's going to, which is fantastic. I know, you need one of those. But we have somebody on Cranberry Isles, and
We can start with Cheryl. Are all of these networks fiber-based, and did you consider wireless?
Yeah, well, we're in a unique situation where we have an underwater cable that does not have fiber. It's pretty antiquated and ready to be replaced. but we don't know when that's going to happen. So our particular situation is microwave to the island, and then from our base on the island, it's wireless to the home. And I mean, fiber to the home, sorry. And we did consider wireless, but the fiber just seemed to be a little more solid for us.
Other communities like to answer?
We looked at a very variety of technologies, but we finally decided that we had to keep the power footprint as low as possible. So by going with fiber, you essentially have to power the central office, and then the subscribers need power, but you don't need power anywhere else in the system. If you have a wireless system on Islesboro, it would have been 50, 60, I don't know, dozens of antennas that required power, each one with power backup. And we had no interest in thinking that would be reliable enough. So fiber was the way to go for us.
Yeah, I think in Alton's case, looking towards the future, what would be the biggest bang for the buck as far as infrastructure, and we saw fiber as being that.
We also looked at wireless, but our committee really wanted fiber to the home.
Is there a particular reason that your committee wanted fiber to the home? Was there a benefit to it over wireless?
Better for the future, knew where it was going. They wanted to be connected, and they wanted there to be room for growth.
Capacity growth.
They were concerned about, wireless and how well that would serve. We're not a flat town, and they just were concerned about what that would mean and what everyone's connectivity would really be.
Any last thoughts from our panelists?
I think the theme of these conferences is that it's important for the town to take a leadership position, a proactive position in solving the problem that you have for delivering great internet. After that, there's 1,000 ways to do this, and just keep going. There's 1,000 ways to do this.
Thank you. For those who provided questions that we did not get to, and for questions that didn't seem thoroughly answered, the Maine Broadband Coalition will be taking these questions and putting up answers on our new website, on our blog. So again, please check out the new website. Please become a general member. And if you have a thought of who would make a good advisory committee member, there's the form on the registration table. So please put some thought into that as well. Let's give our panelists a round of applause.